Foreigners' funny names. I guess that most people are insular, in the sense that they don't have the time or inclination to have any concern for the lives and cultures of the 7 billion people around them. It doesn't put food on the table, and it doesn't make an obvious improvement to their own lives. Their culture is their own, and they are happy with what they know. When they go on holiday, they come back telling people that they've been to Turkey. Going to Turkey involves flying in a plane full of English-speaking people, to a hotel run by English-speaking people, where they spend 2 weeks with, well, you get the idea. By the way, if you're starting to formulate an argument that the vast majority of people in South Britain are outward-looking, I give you one word: Brexit. This state of mind, I feel, is a corollary of being brought up in a nation that once ruled over 20% of the people on earth. It didn't do it through its overweening might in science or the arts. It did it because it found it was able to build better bombs and battleships than anybody else. Imperial terror was mixed with psychopathic governance and a talent for railway construction. This is not a good foundation on which to build a civilization. At least the Romans gave us aqueducts and the designs of temples which could be repurposed for banks and railway stations 2,000 years later. Football is the most important social phenomenon in the world, in part because it holds up a mirror to life. In this case, the post-imperial psychoses was beautifully shown in English football by the attitude towards foreign players. By foreign, I mean people who spoke heavily accented English or who appeared to have no English at all. If you are reading this from outside of England, you will have to accept that people from Wales, Scotland and Ireland were not counted as foreign. They inhabited a strange twilight world, not normal enough to be English, but not foreign enough to be counted as foreign. How funny it must have been to observe the spelling of John Colquhoun's name and its illogical pronunciation. How did those Sunderland and Millwall fans cope? All English managers realised that they needed Scottish players in their team. 99% of them would not have been aware that the well-worn path south of the border was due to the fact that English teams were taught to play football by Scotch professors in the second half of the 19th century. Anyone who insisted on playing the dribbling kick and rush game would have been summarily dismissed by 11 gentlemen playing the scientific combination game that had been perfected north of Hadrian's Wall. The inaugural World Cup had been ignored in 1930 because FIFA had not been founded by the English. Unfortunately, Scotland rode in behind this nonsense, which probably denied them a World Cup win. Given that the United States almost made it to the final with what was essentially a core of Scottish League rejects, hindsight will not be kind to the Blazers of the Jazz Age. Listening to the radio in the 1970s, on the few occasions when a big England or European club game was being broadcast, one could have gained a few examples of the humour that was evident in foreign names. I recall that Hammer Kameratene from Norway caused great amusement. I could possibly see that, due to the unusual number of syllables in a word which just means the comrades of Hamar. Any child of the 60s might have guessed it, given that half the films we watched seemed to have somebody shouting "Hilfe Kameraden" when they weren't telling us that, "For you, Tommy, the war is over." What annoyed me even more was that Ajax of Amsterdam seemed to cause amusement. Colgate-Palmolive sold a cleaning product with the same name, Ajax, which made the Amsterdam team a cause for great hilarity, said no one ever. There was even a joke at which I laughed, which went thus. Question: who is the most hated fan in German football? Answer: the guy at a Borussia Mönchengladbach match who shouts, "Give us a B!" I am curious to know how he shouted, "You umlaut!" On the occasions when I watched a game involving foreign people, there might have been a running joke between the commentator and the ex-player expert, which would leave me shouting at the telly. It always followed the same lines. Foreign player with a funny name is hard to pronounce. Commentator laughs at ex-player's inability to pronounce said name. Expert laughs in a "am I bothered" style. Rinse and repeat for the next game. I don't know about you, but I take pride in my work. I always tell the children I teach that it is logical for them to love me, despise me, or more reasonably, to be so disinterested that they have no opinion whatsoever on me. What I will not countenance are accusations of laziness or duplicity. I always found the commentary team guilty on the first charge. I could not and still cannot understand why the producer of a programme would pay somebody who admitted that he could not be bothered to learn the names of the players on which he was paid to comment. Was the English media so desperate that they could not persuade one articulate footballer to take the gig? Behind this simple idiocy lay a darker truth. The non-British players were not worthy of consideration because they failed the only test worth a damn, their quantum of Britishness. Of course I'm being somewhat sleek here, for I understand that Britishness really means Englishness. Outside of these sceptred isles, the idea of Scotland having any sort of mindshare is a lonely concept. In essence, we should all remember that we are all strangers who will live or die on the comfort of other strangers. I offer you word poker from the enemy in your midst. Throw down your cards for Culhane, Farker, Mulgai, Mingies and Polmadee, and with my best sardonic smile I will trouser your money with Cholmondeley, Fanshawe, Fiennes, Beaulieu and Althorp.